The new economy and the traditional economy, especially the way to exploit the use of internet and big data technology. So with this use of internet technology, we can expand the traditional trade in a very big way, in a much more efficient way. So and we can see. From the website, so we can buy a lot of things from abroad instead of taking them with us during the trip. So and also we have instead of only buying some raw materials and energy products from the foreign countries, we also started buying upgraded consumer goods and the media products and also high-tech products.
All right, and right now in the Vietnamese city of Da Nang, Vietnamese President Tran Dai Quang is welcoming leaders of APEC economies for the official opening ceremony of the APEC Economic Leaders meeting, and Chinese President Xi Jinping is scheduled to arrive soon. So talking about this, the keynote speeches happened on Friday at the APEC CEO Summit. US President Donald Trump also gave a keynote speech. So Mr. Dunham, many observers and global media have picked up this huge contrast between the messages of two presidents, namely US and China. What do you make of this? China has been talking about inclusiveness. What do you think is the key message from the US?
I think symbolically and substantively, this past week has been a turning point for global economics. You saw Donald Trump come to Japan, South Korea, and argue with the leaders, the longtime allies, about trade. Come to China saying he didn't blame China, he blamed his predecessors as president for the trade deficit. Then you see him go to Vietnam and he's talking about bilateral relationships, a complete change in the global free trade system, while you see President Xi Jinping embracing the global free trade system, suggesting reforms in it, but really moving into the leadership as Donald Trump is stepping back from global leadership on trade, where he's saying America first. Xi Jinping did not criticize Donald Trump at all, but he pivoted off of Donald Trump's nationalism and protectionism to a globalism. And if you looked at the American CEOs, Xi Jinping actually got more applause than Donald Trump in his speech. So, I mean, I guess, and if you look at the American media is often very critical of President Xi Jinping, but gave him good marks yesterday and just said, as long as China does not act aggressively in the South China Sea, this could be a real turning point for China and its relationship with its neighbors, with the regional trade in Asia.
Right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll be getting back to you very soon. You're watching CGTN. We're focusing on the APEC Economic Leaders meeting in Vietnam. Stay with us. More global news now. French police have arrested a man after he rammed his car into a group of people, injuring 3 students from China. The attack occurred near a university campus in the southern French city of Toulouse. Police say an attempted murder investigation has been opened. Kevin Uzbek reports.
These 3 Chinese students are still in a Toulouse hospital recovering from their injuries. BFM TV, a French news outlet, is reporting that of those 3 students, one of them, a 23-year-old woman, has the most serious injuries. But really, the extent of all of their injuries, we don't know just yet. We don't have many details. Also, at this point, we don't have many details in terms of the driver's motive. According to prosecutors, that as this driver, a 28-year-old man, was taken into custody, he told police officers that he did, in fact, deliberately target these students, but why he targeted them, we don't know. It's being reported in French media outlets that this man has a history of mental illness. Prosecutors do say that at this point, they are not classifying this as terrorism. They say that could change, but this doesn't look terror-related at this point. They say this 28-year-old driver does have a criminal history, but it's a criminal history that involves petty crime like drug use. But at this point, the investigation's still underway. Still many questions in terms of specifically his motive here, but prosecutors say they are determined to figure it all out. Kevin Uzbek, CGTN, Paris.
Still in Europe, but we turn to Brexit. The sixth round of talks on the UK leaving the EU has concluded. The EU has given the UK a 2-week deadline for the next stage of talks. Mariam Zaidi has more from Brussels.
As he opened his press conference, Michel Barnier, the EU chief Brexit negotiator, thanked the press for their continued interest in Brexit talks, but added that no one should expect any announcements or decisions from the sixth round of Brexit negotiations. But the one morsel of information we did get: the EU is giving the UK 2 weeks to stump up an offer for their divorce settlement with the EU, so that EU leaders can then greenlight trade talks at their December summit.
But let's be clear. I've said on several occasions in these press conferences, including today, there's no doubt that we have made and continue to make, including this round, significant progress across a whole range of issues.
And of course, in order for that to happen, substantial progress needs to be made on those 3 core issues of separation. So citizen rights, the Irish border and the financial settlement. So in a nutshell, it's all coming down to money. But the question is, will the UK meet EU expectations and offer a settlement in the region of 60 billion euros? Mariam Zaidi, CGTN, Brussels.
Lebanon's top leaders are demanding the return of Prime Minister Saad Hariri. Hezbollah claims that he's been detained in Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, Riyadh and some of its Gulf state allies have called on their citizens to leave Lebanon. Yumna Nafal is in Beirut with more.
The Hezbollah chief, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, gave a speech today in which he said that the resignation of the Prime Minister Saad Hariri is considered void. One, because it was done from Saudi Arabia, and he is demanding with other Lebanese government officials that Saad Hariri returns to Lebanon should he wishes to resign, and elaborate on the reasons while in his home country. Basically, Nasrallah said that a year ago, when Prime Minister Saad Hariri was appointed to the cabinet, Lebanon was able to form a unity government. The economy was stable. There were no attacks. We've been able to keep Lebanon, again, aside from the Syrian crisis, even with the spillover and the Syrian refugees that now count more than 2 million in number. So that's close to half of the Lebanese population. And so he's saying, with other Lebanese government officials, including the foreign minister of Lebanon, that it is up to the Lebanese people to choose who decides, who stays and who goes. And so, therefore, it is time that foreign powers don't meddle in Lebanese affairs. Also, the UN chief, Antonio Guterres, said that he doesn't understand what is going on. He says this is a very serious matter because Lebanon is an independent state, and therefore it is not up to foreign meddling to interfere in what happens on a local level.
The criminal investigation into Russia's role in the 2016 U.S. presidential election is widening. Special counsel Robert Mueller is looking into new allegations involving Michael Flynn. He was Donald Trump's first national security advisor. Allegations reportedly connect Flynn to a plot to kidnap a Muslim cleric for money. Toby Muse reports.
Special counsel Robert Mueller is reportedly looking into an alleged plot involving former national security advisor Mike Flynn and a plan to forcibly remove a Muslim cleric from the United States and send him to Turkey. All of this at the direction of the Turkish government. According to the Wall Street Journal, Flynn and his son were to be paid as much as $15 million to deliver Fethullah Gulen to the Turkish government. The cleric has been living in exile in the US since the late 1990s. The newspaper said the plan allegedly involved putting Gulen on a private jet and flying him to a Turkish prison. Turkey has requested the cleric be legally extradited, but the US government has so far rejected this. The government of Turkey accuses Gulen of plotting last year's coup attempt and calls him a terrorist. The allegations of a plot involving the dissident cleric could open up Flynn and his son to charges including conspiracy to kidnap. Before joining the Trump administration, Flynn had lobbied on behalf of the Turkish government in the US. He didn't reveal this until March of this year. In November last year, Flynn wrote an editorial in The Hill, a Washington, D.C. newspaper, in which he urged the US to extradite the cleric to Turkey. The forces of radical Islam derive their ideology from radical clerics like Gulen, who is running a scam, Flynn wrote. We should not provide him safe haven. Flynn served as National Security Advisor for only 24 days before resigning over secret meetings with Russia's ambassador to the US. Toby Muse, CGTN, Washington.
A pair of foreign journalists have been sentenced to 2 months in jail in Myanmar for illegally flying a drone over parliament buildings. The journalists are from Singapore and Malaysia and work for Turkish radio and television. They were detained at the end of last month. The local interpreter and a driver were also sentenced to 2 months. Another hearing is set for November the 16th. Dozens of Rohingya refugees continue to flee Myanmar for Bangladesh. This week, a makeshift raft loaded with 52 passengers drifted across the river separating the two countries. Another group of 16 Rohingya refugees were found floating in a plastic drum. More than 600,000 people have fled violence in Myanmar since late August.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
People on the go. Businesses grow. Leaders get together.
共享经济全球化的好处。
Looking for a common destiny. Powering strong economies. The APEC 2017 in Vietnam. Creating new dynamism. Fostering a shared future. Catch the live coverage from Da Nang, Vietnam on CGTN.
Now we turn to the Vietnamese city of Da Nang for the 2017 APEC Economic Leaders Meeting. The theme for this year's official gathering is creating a new dynamism, fostering a shared future. For more insight into that, let's talk to our studio guest. So, Mr. Wang, what do you make of the theme? What do you think is the most needed new dynamism for this particular region?
And I think this theme is just about similar or very close to the theme we are talking about during the 19th Parties Congress, and I think the new growth should be arising through the combining the new economy and the traditional economy. And secondly, the new growth should come from the renewed trade system. So far, the WTO process is kind of stalemated, and we definitely need something to replace that or to push that. A lot of countries tried a lot of alternatives like RCEP or TPP, etc. But none of them is getting very close to a reality. So I think this time the leader should think about about the Beijing roadmap back in 2014, and they may think about how to combine all these ideas, all those alternatives into a very widely agreed new principles. So in order to push the region towards a free trade future, because I think it is almost a mission impossible to realize the free trade in this area.
Mr. Dunham, do you think this is possible?
I think that you can see some regional trade blocks coming. Now, not in the immediate future, because Trans-Pacific Partnership, even though Donald Trump pulled out, is still alive and is being pushed very hard by Japan. I think that what will happen is you will see continuing development there. China is pushing an alternative for the entire Asia-Pacific region. I think that eventually you will see something happen, whether China is at the center of it or not. I think that we're seeing a move away from global trade under the WTO system to free trade, but in regional agreements, regional blocks. And so I don't think it's going to be easy.
So if we focus on this particular
happen.
region of Asia-Pacific,
Yes.
what do you think is the biggest challenge in forging a unified trade bloc in this region?
I think the biggest challenge is big countries with different priorities. I think that Japan, Korea, and China all have different priorities. So I think it's sort of political and economic.
What is China's priority?
China's priority, well, I think there are two sets of priorities. One is to create integrated and freer trade. The second for China economically is to shift from a heavy manufacturing-based economy to one more based on innovation. That's a bigger challenge for other countries. China is ahead of most of East Asia in the shift to innovation economy. But I think that the biggest challenges right now are political. That some of the biggest economies are still resistant to a free trade zone in the Asia Pacific.
And Mr. Wang, earlier you briefly touched upon the topic of structural reforms because you mentioned a traditional economy, a new economy, the role of the internet. What do you make of China's own reform in this regard at this moment?
In China, we are facing more tasks, more challenges, except that. So I think we are so far very successful to utilizing this new economy, new technologies. But right now, we should be working on a more wide, more deep-going reform, structural reform, especially the reform concerning the market mechanism, the SOEs, corporate governance.
So how do you think China's economic transformation will be reflected on countries' trade to the outside world?
Well, China is right now has already a huge foreign reserve, and right now the trade structure is more like more balanced than 10 years ago. So we not only manufacturing things for the world, but also we need to buy more and more products and services from abroad.
So do you think that's one of the reasons for China to initiate this very high-profile China Import Expo in Shanghai next year?
Yes. I think the President Xi has already mentioned, I think, an import event next year in Shanghai. So that's a very strong signal for the world to show that China is willing to share the responsibility for the new growth, and is willing to let the other countries to share the fruit of Chinese growth. And with this event, China will also show the world what exactly the Chinese market will demand from outside world.
Mr. Dunham, we know that the Chinese government is also trying very hard to boost domestic consumption. Do you think that will provide more opportunities for regional players?
The answer is yes. I mean, it provides more opportunities for China in terms of domestic consumption, say tourism, other issues like that. But for others, yes, if the market opens and there's more domestic consumption, Korea is so close by, and there's so many Korean products that people in China would like to buy. I could see real opportunities, and I could see that as a diplomatic opportunity, holding out the carrot of the economic opportunity that there is in China. It's also a way to deal with a country like the United States under Donald Trump, to open markets.
U.S. President Donald Trump has just arrived at the official opening ceremony of APEC economic leaders meeting. He also mentioned this trade imbalance between China and U.S. and his keynote speech from Friday. But do you think that's China should be to blame?
Well, I think that this is a very complicated issue. I think.
What about the structure of China-U.S. trade? Because U.S. bans high-tech products
Well, I think
China.
both countries are protecting their economies from some parts, but I would argue that China limits more American involvement in its economy than the United States does the United States does with Chinese companies. Yes, the United States should do more for Chinese direct investment in the U.S., and yes, there needs to be discussion of the dual-use technology, but there are many more limits on American companies in China, and the Chinese economy, as Donald Trump said yesterday, it goes way back. And there were legitimate issues with currency manipulation and with other issues of dumping 15 years ago. That's changed, and there is not the issue now, but there still are some structural issues that are slowly being dealt with, and we saw some changes even while Donald Trump was in Beijing, but those need to continue. This is the kind of thing that can be negotiated. Some of it is bilateral with the U.S., but I think a lot of it is structural with the economy. And as state-owned enterprises become more efficient, if they can become more efficient, if corruption can be wrung out of them, I think the government would feel more comfortable opening up to more competition. I think in some ways the government in China has protected Chinese companies that are not as efficient from their foreign competitors. And I think that will change and give more of an opportunity. But the underlying importance is for President Xi Jinping, for the Chinese government, to make the state-owned enterprises more efficient so they can compete fairly with international competitors in China in the marketplace.
Mr. Wang, what about infrastructure and connectivity? How can China's Belt and Road Initiative weigh in this region's search for new dynamism?
Yes, I think the Belt and Road Initiative is just about the investment and building things. So China has already found out the focus or the most acute demand from this area is to improve the infrastructure. So if you don't do that, so there's no real free trade, no real growth around this in this area. So I think China right now is using its expertise, its finance power to boost the regional infrastructure building, like railways, highways, other public utilities. So after that, I think we will be building a much better platform for the new trade. So that's where the APEC reform will comes in. So then we can combine the systematic reform from the APEC platform and the renewed, improved infrastructure platform. Thanks to the Belt and Road Initiative.
President Xi Jinping also talked about the importance of open economy. What do you think China is going to do in the near future in this regard?
So China is on its way to build the country as a creative leading, an innovation leading, creatively leading nation. So to fulfill this task, this challenge, so you have to introduce all these talents, new expertise, but technique from all over the world. So you have to boost the much stronger exchange between China and other countries on all different levels. So only under such circumstances and environment, so we can finally achieve a higher level, or like mid and higher end of the manufacturing value chain, supply chain. So and also we can.
Well, gentlemen, we have to stop you there. Let's cross live to the Vietnamese city of Da Nang. Chinese President Xi Jinping has arrived at the venue for the 2017 APEC Economic Leaders Meeting for the official welcome ceremony from Vietnamese President Tran Dai Quang. You're watching live footage from the Vietnamese city of Da Nang. Chinese President Xi Jinping has arrived at venue for the 2017 APEC Economic Leaders Meeting.
Chào mừng Tổng Bí thư Chủ tịch nước Trung Quốc Tập Cận Bình.
Chinese President Xi Jinping is welcomed by Vietnamese President Tran Dai Quang. and 2017 APEC economic leaders meeting is about to officially open in a short while. Chinese President Xi Jinping's speech at the APEC meetings has been well received in many countries. Here's what some people have said about that speech.
China needs development, and it also hopes to see the development of other countries. China not only wants to see itself prosper, but also all its neighbors and the countries along the One Belt, One Road do so. The destiny of all these countries are bound together. I like the term "a community of shared future" used by President Xi, because it reflects the reality.
Bu projenin de Amerika ile Çin'i karşılaştıracak olursak,
if we make a comparison between the foreign policies of China and the U.S., we will see that Washington gives priority to its own interests, while Beijing is more for win-win cooperation. Chinese leaders have made clear their stance at the APEC meetings, and I think win-win will create a better future for the world.
What is so unique about transnationalism? What is so unique about BRI? What is so unique about the concepts that President Xi first revealed in Davos is that China is thinking about how to open up and help other countries develop. And some people think, well, there's a Chinese game here. It's in China's interest. But actually, if you look at the overall concept that President Xi is talking about, unless the world develops, all the world develops, there will be jealousy and there will be attempts to protect vested interests. And China is taking the view, we don't want to be an empire. We want to be part of the world.
The opening up of China will benefit the entire world, not only the ASEAN countries, but also the countries in the continent of Africa and also the countries in the Americas. Dealing with China is a very good way for all of the developing countries, because China respects the rights. China is here to help other economies, not belligerently. And China has never had a history of aggression with other countries. And as we can see with the One Belt, One Road, more countries will benefit from this One Belt, One Road.
Meanwhile, the U.S. President Donald Trump expressed his position on trade. Ron Melter reports.